Hey there, in today's video we're going to study a fairly advanced topic that you should be aware of. And I'm talking about a hook. If you've never heard about it, this is simply an opponent's pawn that you can use to open lines. And I know that this might sound a bit abstract, so let's evaluate a few positions to become more familiar with this idea. So here in this first position, white has a fairly good position. White has two bishops, and this bishop on f1, it might be developed, but it's already quite active on the initial square. That's why here white wanted to play ambitiously and wanted to attack black's king. So here white could castle long, even though the king on e1 is still fairly safe. That's why white straight away went for this idea of h4. Now first of all, white played the move h3, so playing h3 and then h4 might look a bit hard to understand, but if we know this idea of a hook, we can understand this fairly quickly. So here this pawn on g6 is what we call a hook, because it can allow white to open the h-file after going h4 and h5. So white's idea is going to mainly be capturing on g6 to open the h-file for the rook. And if black wants to stop this plan, so after h4 going h5, which might sometimes be an interesting idea, in this case, particularly since black doesn't have the light square bishop, now this pawn h5 actually becomes a hook, so white can go g4 and still open lines. So here, taking on h5 is a big threat, and if black captures on g4 after queen takes, now the queen has become more active, and the idea of going h5 is now even stronger because now white will open the g and h files to attack black's king. So this position is already quite bad for black. So in the game, black correctly allowed white to play h5, so after knight b to d7, white went for h5. The main idea is to go pawn takes g6, even though h6 might be an idea in some lines, restricting the bishop on g7. And an important point whenever we go for this idea, we need to make sure that our opponent cannot stop our plan, in this case for example going g5, because here after g5, white would simply capture the pawn on g5, either after playing h6 or straight away. So this is not possible for black. And in the game after e6, now white captured on g6, and after pawn takes, now white has ideas to attack. For example, queen to h3, planning queen to h7 is an idea, or even g4 and f5, now using the e6 and g6 pawns as hooks. So white here has a better position, even though the game ended in a draw, but this position is more pleasant for white. So let's now analyze another completely different position. This position actually looks quite dull, material is equal, there doesn't seem to be a lot of attacking potential for either side, but this position is actually quite dangerous for black after white found this very interesting idea of b5 trying to open lines. So using the a6 pawn as a hook, and first of all, if black doesn't capture the pawn after a5, white would simply capture the pawn, still having the idea to invade on a7, and now this b pawn is actually a very strong pass pawn, so this position is already quite desperate for black. That's why black captured on b5, and now we see white's idea, which is to go rook to a7, invading on the 7th rank, attacking black's king, and black's position is amazingly quite desperate. So here, first of all, black cannot block the check with bishop to d7, because after rook to d3, this pin will cost black a piece. In the game, black tried king to f6, or after king to f8, white has this very strong idea of rook to c7. We see that this bishop doesn't have many squares to go, only a6, but there white would follow up with rook to a3. In fact, here rook to a3 and rook to a8 is a big threat, just capturing the bishop. If white tries going b4, here white has this very nice trick, rook to d3. We see how black's pieces are just overloaded, and after black captures on d3, white has this very strong intermediate check after capturing the bishop, and then white captures the rook, ending up a bishop ahead in material. That's why here black tried king to f6, at least the king is more active, but now white has this idea of rook to f3, and after king to g6, capture on f7, taking on g7 is a huge threat. That's why black tried rook to g8, and here white played a similar idea, rook f to c7, now rook to a8 will come, and white will win the bishop on c8, so the position is already desperate for black. So let's now use this idea of the hook to understand a very theoretical position that we get in the Sicilian defense Najdorf variation. So I'm going to discuss the main moves that each side have here. In this position we have an opposite side castling, so this idea of a hook becomes very important because in this position both sides can push their pawns. Here white can push the pawns on the king side, trying to attack black's king, and black can push the pawns on the queen side. So here white started with the main move, which is g4, just going for an attack. And even though in this position black has many options, black's main reply makes a lot of sense, which is to go b5. Very often a counter-attack is the best defense, so let's see other alternatives. And here I just want to mention that the move h6, which might be a natural reaction because here white has an idea to attack the knight, is actually quite bad because this already creates a hook for white to attack. So here white has many ways to go. g5 straight away makes a lot of sense, attacking the knight and the pawn, and after black captures and white captures, now white has opened the g-file for a rook to attack black's king. But even here going h4 is another very logical follow-up, so black is not achieving anything by going h6, even weakening the king, because now white can open lines by going g5 or even going h5 and g5. And even after h6, there's the idea of taking the pawn h6, sacrificing a piece to open lines. In this particular position, it is not a good idea, but this idea is always in the air, and black even has to watch out for that idea. So after g4, b5 makes a lot of sense, black has to get counterplay. And again in this position, white normally continues with the main plan of g5. So going a3 in this position, planning to stop b4, is a move that we should be careful about because this can provide a hook for black to open lines. Although in this particular position, the move a3 is fairly playable and not as bad as the move h6 because here black doesn't have an easy way to go b4 as opposed to white having an easy way of going g5. So here in this position, these two pawns cannot move easily. For example, after a5, white can simply capture a pawn and then try to close the position with a4. So this is actually bad for black. So even though the move a3 might be playable, here white normally follows up with the move g5, which makes more sense. And in this position, knight to h5 is actually one of black's main options. And you probably heard that the knight on the rim is dim, but in this particular case, this knight on h5 is actually blocking the h4 pawn, so it has a defensive role. But in this position, in addition to knight to h5, b4, again, counterattacking, which is very often the best defense, is more commonly played here. And now white has a few options. If white captures on f6, here black captures the knight on c3, planning to take the queen on d2. And after queen takes and knight takes, both sides manage to open lines. White has the g file and black might try to get activity on the b and c files. This position is fairly complicated and balanced. Or white might decide to not open the position and move the knight. e2 is a very common move here, and we still get a very sharp position. Here one idea of knight to e2 is to meet knight to h5 with knight to g3. Black doesn't want to capture on g3 because this would open the h-file. Or here white has tried the move knight to e8, and now white can use the e5 pawn as a hook and go f4. So many games have followed this path, and here black, instead of capturing f4, very often goes a5, trying to go a4, and we get a very crazy position. But in any case, I just want to use this idea of a hook in order to understand how both sides try to attack each other by opening lines. And I want to finish with a very advanced example. This really takes the concept of a hook to the extreme. Here in this position, which looks fairly quiet, I think that black has a good position with these two very nice bishops. White decided to play the seemingly quiet h3, trying to prevent this pin that black might go for after the move bishop to g4. As we'll see, this was not a very good idea for white, at least from a practical point of view. Here white could have continued developing, for example, knight b to d2, allowing this pin, which black doesn't have to go for. But now white has ideas to go c3. One idea might be to develop the queen, but also if black wants to go aggressively, as black did in the game, now white has this idea of attacking by going b4, and we can see that in some lines this pawn on c6 can be used as a hook, or if black tries to keep the bishop on the strong diagonal, now white can go a4, trying to go a5. So this is a very complicated position, but here white is the one trying to attack. But here, before going for this idea of c3 and d4, which is one of white's main idea in this position, white decided to play the move h3. And here black was really inspired and went for this move rook to g8. So this move is just impossible to understand if we don't know this idea of a hook. So the move rook to g8 wouldn't make any sense if white pawn was on h2 and not on h3. But now this idea of going g5 and g4 is going to be in the air because black didn't castle. So here, white played the move king to h1, trying to get away of the g file, and after knight to h5, c3, and g5, we get a very wild position, but at least from a practical point of view, white has to be very careful to avoid losing in just a few moves after g4, which would open the position on the king side. In fact, white didn't manage to defend this position, and black won the game in style. So I hope that you can use this idea of a hook in your games. It is really an advanced idea that can help you a lot. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. This will help me a lot. In any case, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.